inside the European Union. And I made clear the referendum was about this and this alone, not the future of any single politician, including myself. But the British people have made a very clear decision to take a different path. And as such, I think the country requires fresh leadership to take it in this direction. I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination. This is not a decision I've taken lightly, but I do believe it's in the national interest to have a period of stability and then the new leadership required. There is no need for a precise...
So long, pig fucker. Yes, David Cameron has resigned. That was his resignation speech. Well, I'm back. I'm back from Scotland. I had a lovely time at the Scottish UFO and Paranormal Festival. I'll be doing a special video all about that. But of course, the first matter to address is the EU referendum that took place on Thursday night, and we had the results Friday morning just before I left. You'll be glad to know I'm an awful lot more cheerful than I was in the last video I uploaded. Now, it's funny that the video you watched, my last one, Vote Leave 2, the count, I end the last part of that video, I'm looking very, very dismal and downhearted, and indeed I was, because I've convinced myself that the Leave side had won, and the Leave side had won. That was the end of it, basically. That was, as I explained in the video at the time, I was feeling very, very downhearted at the time. I was preparing myself for that disappointment, which I felt was inevitable. So, I mean, I set that video to upload. I went to bed. I set my alarm for 5 o'clock because I had to get up to go to Scotland. And I basically left. I went to bed as soon as I'd finished filming. So what you saw in that video was basically the last thing I was doing before I went to bed. I wake up at 5 AM. Go back to the news page where the referendum figures were on, and what do I know? The Leave side is way ahead, and it's almost at the line, that line in the middle, which demonstrates the target where the referendum achieves a majority. And I had to rub my eyes. Was I dreaming? Was I still asleep? I was like, bloody, I couldn't believe it. And so I went on Facebook, and everyone was talking about it, and Chris Everard was posting loads of stuff up on there, going, and I was like, what? I was just absolutely, I was speechless. And so I kept watching, and I was like, and I was looking at the clock, because I knew I had to go and get my coach for Scotland. And I was thinking, I cannot leave until it reaches that line, and I know we've got it. The Leave side has won. And I was thinking, bloody heck. And so when it did, I mean, I've invented a new word. That word is happy shock. It's like shock, where it just hasn't sunk. You know, when something really bad happens, you get shock, and you say it hasn't sunk in yet. I'm just in shock. Well, that's what I'm like now. I still am, because I've been away for it. I've had a little bit of a hiatus between dealing with this subject, so I'm still in happy shock now. Because it's happy shock is shock, which is happy. That's hence the phrase. So I'm in a state of happy shock. It hasn't sunk in yet. There's still a part of me that thinks I'm going to wake up and find the remains of one. But I'm just amazed. I mean, Cameron. I mean, I found out actually on the journey, because I got the coach only as far as Milton Keynes, and then Tino Tiberius Kirk came and picked me up, and we drove to Scotland from there. We picked up Larry Warren, one of the speakers, and his family, and we drove from there. So I was listening to the car radio on the way, so I listened to Cameron's resigned a couple of hours later on Friday morning. And I was just, I don't know what to think. It's happened. I mean, as I said, I'm not under any illusions of that this is the end. I know exactly everything I said in the previous video still counts. You know, what's going to happen now, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, because the government are not going to give up that easily. They're not going to let us go that easily. and Britain leaving the EU is not the end result. It's not the only thing that can happen. It's just part of all this. It's just part of this campaign against the New World Order. It's just, as I say, it's just a spanner in the works. It's one spanner in the works. It's the first shot in the battle. The government are going to hit back. They're going to hit back hard. But what I like to do most of all, I think my first thoughts when I sort of settled down a bit and got used to the idea, was that I just want to say how much I appreciate the British people, how much I admire the British people. I want to admire the British people because you dared. You dared. And when you've dared once and it's worked, you prevailed. You can dare again with other things. Your enemies, the government, have thrown everything they can at you. As I said before, David Cameron has never, and the leaders of the Remain campaign and government have never put as much effort into trying to manipulate the British people into doing what they want as they have during this over this particular subject. You have been made to feel afraid. You've been made to feel guilty. You've been made to feel angry. You've been made to feel insecure. You've been threatened. You've been browbeaten, and you've been moral blackmailed. You've even had, it's even possible that someone lost their life just to generate some of this propaganda. I'm talking about Joe Cox MP, of course. And of course, as no doubt, a few boxes of Remain votes were probably added to a couple of polling stations, just like what happened in Scotland. So there was probably an attempt to weigh the dice, to rig the election slightly, as I've no doubt that happened. But it didn't work. It didn't work. It didn't work because you, the British people, dared. And I just want to say how much I admire that. I really, really do. I've never felt so much respect and pride in the British people as I do now. This is hopefully the start, as Paul Joseph Watson has said, this is a start of a movement, a popular movement against the establishment. And I hope he's right. As I say, it's not over yet. We're going to have to be ready for a much longer, more protracted battle, because for the reasons I said in the previous two videos, where the government are going to try something else, they're going to try some more dirty tricks. There's already signs that those dirty tricks are beginning. But we're free of the EU. I mean, well, for now, as Cameron has said, Cameron has superficially admitted defeat. He's resigned. They're going to hold now a leadership election for the Conservative Party and the Prime Minister. Unlike my American viewers, we in Britain don't choose our head of government. The party does. The party that's made the majority in Parliament, the equivalent of the US Congress, they select a head of government from that party. And the only time we get to choose on our head of government is when we're actually voting for a particular party to as a majority to win a general election. I don't know what's going to happen there. It's probably going to be Boris Johnson, who's I don't know, he's almost as bad. I mean, I know he's on the Remain side, or on the Leave side. Well, he said he was on the Leave side, but we'll see what happens. I'll say more about that at another time. But we're in a position now where all kinds of things could happen. I mean, the TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, that's the first thing that springs to mind. Now, we're now in a position where that was probably one of the biggest fears I had. That's now now in question. Because thanks to you, the British people, TTIP is now going to be in question, which means the fracking agenda is going to be affected. The immigration, the immigration, that is the migrant crisis, is now, Britain now has a chance of asserting itself within the migrant crisis, which I said will put us in a better position in the upcoming European civil war, which I think is on the cards. And if we're going to avoid it, people of Europe are going to avoid it, then we're going to have to become very, very aware very, very quickly. And now, I suppose what I suppose you may want to know is the pen footage. I mean, obviously, the result was leave, so therefore you could say that the pen camera footage that I made with this little thing here, my little pen camera, my trusty little secret hidden camera. You could say that's not needed anymore. You could say that, well, it's leave, so that's the end of it. But I'm going to keep it for a while. I'm not going to publish it in this particular video. The reason is you can't actually see much in it because, unfortunately, because it was sort of hanging on there like that, and the viewfinder is obviously has no viewfinder, so I just have to train it and where I think is the right direction, which is difficult when you're not holding it like that. Because if I held it like that, it'd be a bit too obvious, and people would know that I was doing it. I mean, you could hear me talking to the security guard and saying, you know, keep an eye out for people fiddling with the ballot, you know. And again, I mean, another thing that I want to express my admiration for the British people and my pride in the British people is your conspiratorial awareness, the hashtag use pens, which went viral, and things like that. You're becoming more and more conspiratorially aware. You've been red-pilled, in other words. So things are looking up. At the moment, everything's in flux. Everything is like, as Tony Blair said, the kaleidoscope is in flux. The pieces have yet to settle, and that's the position we're in right now. And that's with me. I mean, I'm in happy shock. The government are in unhappy shock. They're going, oh hell, what are we going to do now? This is really amazing. Now in Scotland, of course, Nicola Sturgeon, that big fish, the First Minister of Scotland. I've just come back from there, and I've been talking to people about her. She's now going to push another independence referendum, which we'll probably get, because the Scottish people, if you take the votes for referendum in Scotland as a whole, just as a separate entity, Scotland, I think, about 2/3 of people wanted to remain. It was England pretty much that led the Leave campaign. Now, interestingly, in Oxford was pretty similar to Scotland, actually. In fact, Oxford was even more on the Remain side than Scotland. I mean, so people around Oxford, where I live, I think about over 3/4 of them were on the Remain side. And I think that fits with the various. I think that fits with the posters I've seen in windows, because there were loads of Remain posters. I only saw a few Leave posters in Oxford. But Leave is, and Cameron has not. Cameron has not in his, and no one else so far in government, who people who make the decisions, has said anything that indicates there should be anything other than more of the Leave side of things. Hang on, I'm running out of film. One moment. Sorry, I keep meaning to like, I meant to format that disc I've got in there before I actually started filming, but I didn't do it. But apologies for that. But yeah, it's I'll just sorry, one moment. Yeah. Alright, editing problem there. Yeah, I've now got plenty of space on the disc. No, I was just going to say that David Cameron just said, look, this is what's happened. This is the result. That the will of the people has to be respected. I expect there's not a lot else he can say really right now, is there? But that's what I know. He doesn't mean it, of course, and I know that. Well, it's only a matter of time before the big guns are pulled out again, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But at the moment, everyone who on the Leave side is just celebrating. A lot of the Remainiacs are just very miserable, and I'm not the type to gloat, and I'm not going to gloat. Okay, I've just said to these people, the people I know on Facebook and that, I've just said, look, don't worry about it. You know, just stick with it. It might work. You might change your mind and things like that. No point being nasty to people. What's going to happen next? Right. Well, what's going to happen next is we're going to have a first I'm going to keep hold of the pen footage, the pen camera footage, just in case. Okay. I'm not going to broadcast it yet because I don't think this is over. what's going to happen now? I mean, this even happened during the referendum. The pound took a big drop. What they didn't say is, of course, they on the stock market they actually boosted the price of the pound sterling beforehand, so that the drop would look artificially scared and things like that. And of course, there's a lot of panic on the markets, as the markets always do panic. And no doubt some of that panic is sort of encouraged by the people who don't want us to leave the EU, because it makes us look like financial vandals. People who want to leave say, well, you don't care about the economy. Look what the economy's happened. We told you the economy would be ruined if we leave the EU, and look, it's being ruined thanks to you. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. In fact, I think what's going to happen now is we, the British people, are going to experience what can only be described as a punishment beating. And this could take many forms. Primarily it's going to be financial and economic. We are going to go through some tough times, I think, in terms of job losses, in terms of financial problems, in terms of other things like that. And these are going to make us think, oh my God, we've made a mistake. We should not have voted to leave. And it's because we voted to leave the EU, when we're out of the EU, that we're having these financial problems. Now, what you've got to, when that happens, you've got to immediately ask yourself, well, is this because we're really out of the EU? Or are these financial problems being created deliberately by those who want us to go back into the EU, so that we will want to go back into the EU? Problem, reaction, solution, as David Icke says. Ian R. Crane said something about this in my interview with him. In which case, then it could be within 5 to 10 years we could find ourselves back in the EU under a completely new deal, which none of that trouble about us not having the euro anymore. You see, Ian suspects that this is playing into their hands a bit, but there's all kinds of other things that are happening. I mean, since I've been away, there's been some sour grapes from the Remain side. Oh, this is one of the most lunatic things I've ever heard. Right. Labour MP urges Commons vote to block Brexit. This is on Sky News. Tottenham MP David Lammy calls for a vote in the Commons next week to decide whether we should go forward with Brexit. Well, I said from the start, I've told you this in previous videos, this sort of thing's going to happen. The referendum is not legally binding. And this, now, I don't believe, I'll read on a bit more, okay, and I'll tell you what I think. Senior Labour MP David Lammy has urged Parliament to stop this madness, to overturn the result of the EU referendum. The former minister said that the Commons should bring this nightmare to an end through a vote through Parliament. Our sovereign Parliament needs to now vote on... Needs to now vote. He can't even get his grammar right. Needs to vote now, I would say, on whether we should exit the EU. See, the referendum was an advisory, non-binding referendum. The Leave campaign's platform, and there's a lot. Some of the MPs who voted Leave have now changed their minds. Some of them just before. Parliament needs to decide whether we should go forward with Brexit, and there should be a vote in Parliament next week. Let us not destroy our economy on the basis of lies and the hubris of Boris Johnson. Of course, he's had a lot of criticism on Twitter, quite rightly. Anti-democratic, it's elitist. But there's been a petition put online by various people, including this MPs, demanding that the referendum be overturned. Or, I mean, this is absurd, and a lot of people are going through it. I think it's just because they're just so angry and upset at this breakaway from the status quo. I said before, people are addicted to the status quo, so they're angry that there's been this breach of the status quo. So a lot of ordinary people have signed this petition. It's got 2.7 million supporters, which means that Parliament does have to debate it. I mean, whether this could actually be turned into a parliamentary bill, I doubt. I think that the kind of dirty tricks we're going to see, the kind of chicanery we're going to experience to get us back into the EU is going to be far more crafty than just this. This is just too obvious. It would never work. But it is constitutionally possible. It's just politically impossible. It's just can't be done. I mean, there's been a lot of... there's already been some spoof petitions. Like, I've already signed a petition which says that I didn't win the national lottery last week, so I want to rerun it so that I win. And we want a rematch of the Battle of Hastings. It was run by the Normans. The Normans beat the Anglo-Saxons in 1066. Well, we wanted to fight again, and this time, because we don't think it's right. Things like that. These are just spoofs, of course. But I managed to sign one of them before the government took it down. It's not possible for them to, with all this hype over the referendum, to then say, well, we're not going to ignore it, and we're going to have we're immediately going to have a parliamentary debate. This is going to lead to a bill which will be passed. Even Cameron and Jeremy Corbyn are saying, this is not on. This is completely not on. So they're going to debate it on Tuesday anyway. I mean, whatever they vote, I mean, it can't be legally binding. It's lunacy. I think what we're going to see is something a lot more, like I said, there is going to be some kind of double dealing coming up involving referendums and things like that. But it's not going to be that blatant. It's just too obvious. So I don't think that's going to work. But it still does worry me when this sort of thing happens. It does make me concerned that they could just slash out. It's this is it's just pathetic. I'm quite glad. This is another reason why I was glad to have been away while this was going on. I think I needed a break from it because it was just too over the top and intense. The basis of the petition was that the petition was actually started before the referendum, and it's a couple of months before the referendum, and it said, or a few, actually, yeah, it was about a month before the referendum, and it said that if the referendum was less than 60% versus 40% either way, and with a less than 75% turnout, there should be a rerun of the referendum. Well, that was never in the original rules of the referendum. You can't change it because you can't just change it. You can't just change the rules because you don't get the result you like. If the Remain side had won, I wouldn't demand that. I wouldn't demand it. Things like that. But this sort of things making me nervous. I'm going to be watching. I'll probably watch the debate on Tuesday and find out what happens. But oh god, this sort of thing's making me nervous. So that's the situation right now. I'm back. I'm happy. I mean, I've cheered up since the last video. And well, I'm going to have to just. I think I'll go through some of your comments now. Okay, I'm going to go through some of your comments because you left some comments on the previous video, which I'm going to answer now. Stephen Bamber says, "The Queen of England will die next." Yeah, well, she might do. I mean, even Anunnaki reptilians can't live forever. At some point she's going to die. It's going to be on a ritual day, and there'll be a big ritual surrounding the Queen's death, no doubt. I think Prince Philip will probably pop off before she does. Now, Gaffer Gadget said, "Hi Ben, there's no such thing as a truly secret ballot. Every ballot paper has an identifying serial number and a 3D barcode on the back. Keep up the good work. Regards, Gaff." Thanks, Gaff. Now, he's right about that. Chris Everard pointed this out. Now, it is now whether, according to the Electoral Commission, your actual voting and the actual ballot paper is supposedly not able to be identified with your actual polling card. However, you yourself can make a record yourself. Just if you want at some point to identify your ballot paper by taking a photograph of it, you can do that. Chris Everard said that, unless they've changed the rules so that maybe they've changed it so that you can. I don't know. Danny Kai74 says, "Head on a spike like in Game of Thrones." Well, that we were talking about that last week, weren't we? And I mean, I've said that I do not advocate any violence done against anybody. Like I said, it could get to the point where we're faced with this new world order. What do? Do we just, if it's a point where we're faced with it and we've got to do it, and how do we stop it? It could be that heads on spikes could be the only way. In which case, if it's a choice between putting people's heads on spikes and the new world order, I mean, I'll choose the heads on spikes. If we're faced with this dictatorial one world dictatorship that emerges, I mean, I would never ever allow that. I'll do anything I can to prevent that from happening, up to and including sticking somebody's head on a spike. I love Game of Thrones. Actually, it's really good. Dofer says, We won and another victory against the New World Order. Champagne bottles at the ready. Oh, well, I don't have any champagne. I had my disclosure champagne, and I did have a bit of a celebratory drink this weekend with the conference, I'll tell you, because there were a lot of, most people at the conference were very, very pro-leave, even the Scottish people, so we did have a bit of a celebration. But thanks Dofer. I do have my disclosure champagne, of course, which is stored under my bed, which I do hope to pop that cork one day, as you know from my previous videos. Now, Xylomet says, voting out, which would be an ideal to achieve. However, those that control the infrastructure of what we view as Britain would still be in control, which would mean a revolution of sorts on home ground to cut out the roots of these power structures, which is a monumental task, considering that imperialism is still the driving force behind the world, and headed by an elite with control over world finance, war, media, etc. When we talk about Britain being a great independent nation before the EU, we must also realise that for hundreds of years this has been based on genocidal imperialism, mass murder, predatory capitalism as a dysfunctional morality tale. Nothing great about that. However, to be truly progressive, moving on from this, then, we need to be independent of both elite tyranny but also imperialistic tyranny, New World Order, predatory behaviour that we are part of with our allies if we are to be truly great. But are we prepared for that shift? Well, Xylomet, yeah, thanks for the detailed reply. You always produce some very intelligent and detailed comments. And I know what you mean. I think if I understand you correctly, you're saying that there's no point reverting from being a chattel member state of the EU to the headquarters of what at the time was the British Empire, which was used to promote Illuminati rule across the world. And I agree with you on that. I do agree with you on that. I mean, it's a situation now that, in a sense, I think the British Empire has been. It's really the role the British Empire played in the 19th century, 18th and 19th century was, of course, to advance Illuminati rule. When the EU came along, the British Empire was the British people were then encouraged to completely disavow their past. In a sense, there was a lot of propaganda against the British Empire, which I think was rather unfair. Not all of it. I'm not saying the Empire was a good thing, but I think it was painted in too black a light. So, in a sense that the EU was the Britain's place in the EU was we were almost driving our own place into the EU by our own sense of induced guilt at the British Empire. That, I think, is also a mistake. To be great, I think that a Great Britain, a real Great Britain, would have to be something that we've not actually seen before. Time will tell. I mean, maybe it's a form of Britain we don't yet know. I think it'll have to be, actually, seeing as this country is so important. This country, these islands, ever since ancient times, have been, well, it's the heart chakra of the world. That's why the ancient cultures, the pre-Illuminati cultures, built monuments everywhere, like Stonehenge and Avebury and things like that. That's why the majority of crop circles appear in England, especially in the south of England. That is the world's biggest power centre, essentially. Sky Zoo Phone says, so you leave or not? Now I have some hope that Italy does the same. Endlessly, we can go again abroad. Now, fun for you, I've had a conversation with a friend now who actually wants to live abroad and is now upset because they think they can't because of this. Now, as far as foreign travel goes, I don't see why there shouldn't be we could set up bilateral customs and excise rules between different nations. We've done that perfectly well before. There's no reason why we should be isolated, as I said in the previous video. I think it's perfectly possible for us to still be able to travel. I mean, I think anyone who wishes to could. Doesn't mean any harm. I don't see why they shouldn't be allowed to travel wherever they like. Obviously, the decision has to lie with the country itself, I think. But I think no one is going to object because it's in their interest to allow foreign nationals to travel freely, because in their country, if it's understood they respect the culture and they could holiday there and maybe even work there for a short period of time, but if they respect the culture and they don't displace the native culture, I don't see what's the problem. Regarding the vote ID, when you go into a polling station and give you your card, you have a number on the adjudicator's sheet next to which the number is the ballot paper written on it. I challenge the adjudicators on this every time. Most don't answer, but the list is kept for 5 years in case of voting irregularities. Watch out next time you vote. Well, that is interesting because Gaffer Gadget said earlier on that this was not a secret ballot and that the ballot paper has an identifying serial number. Now, I was under the impression that it was not, that serial number did not link your ballot paper to your polling card, but according to Joe Trucker, this is Joe Trucker 1, sorry, I didn't mention his name, it does. So that's, I'll have to look into that, but if that's the case, then no, we do not have a secret ballot. Heidi Neal. Yee-hee, yeah. Heidi Neal, I saw Heidi Neal in Scotland, and we did have a celebration about it. So Heidi and I were both, Heidi's just cheering, power to the people, hashtag, power to the people. She's just cheering here, and she was cheering an awful lot actually last night and the night before when I saw her in Glasgow. So thanks for the comment, Heidi. Ta-ta for now. My time. Hello, Ben. You know about corporations, and I was wondering who actually voted in law to leave the EU. Well, that's what we've just been thinking, hasn't it? Would Great Britain be an island? Would the UK mean there was more than one country voting? United Three Nations. Well, that's what Nicola Sturgeon is saying, basically. How can Scotland, as a nation, be forced out of the EU when the actual Scottish people don't want it? So, really, Scotland needs to become independent and then agree to stay in the EU. Well, you know, this is why when I first heard about Scottish independence, I urged the Scots not to support it. I think I made a mistake, and I did correct myself later on, because I thought, but tactically I said they should not support it. But it does look like Nicola Sturgeon is now very keen, is very pro-EU, and Scottish people tend to be very pro-EU. My time continues. Was it Britain that voted? It's just, I'm sure I've seen videos where these are all classed as separate companies for tax reasons. I'm not sure what you mean there, my time. Anyway, 69 Phuket said, someone's commented on JSnip4's video about Brexit. Here is the comment. Joe, this has been a plan for 30 years. Check out Ferris Bueller's Day Off 6 scene. Notice what his sister says about leaving the family. Also, there was a British flag on his door with an exit sign above. Third, his friend's name is Cameron, like the PM. Fourth, Cameron is wearing a Gordie Howe jersey, who died 13 years before the vote. A Gordie Howe. Gordon Howe, yeah. Now this is, I don't know exactly what that means, but I'll JSNIP for JSNIP4. There's a video there. Does this refer to some kind of film or where there's hidden messages? I don't know. Another thing I've got to ask you, 69 Phuket, or Phuket, whatever your name is. What I did was, when I'm doing these multi-part videos and I answer people's comments in the previous video, I always put a comment note on the previous video just saying, dear viewer, thank you for a comment. I'm replying on the video that's uploaded shortly. I did that just now, and 69 Phuket said, no more shout-outs, Ben. Thanks! Exclamation mark. Now, this is, several people have actually said they don't like me doing this. Okay. Now, I'll make a list of people who don't want these shout-outs, as he calls them, where I put these comments saying, dear viewer, I'm going to give you comments on the next video. But can you tell me, Phuket, and this other person as well, why is that such a bad thing? I mean, is it offensive? Is it abusive? Or what is it you don't like about it? If you explain it to me, I'm sure that'll help. I'll honour your wishes, but could you please explain why? And also, how would you like to be informed in future if I do a multi-part live comment address? I mean, bear in mind, you know, it's if you're asking me to send you a personalised message, it would take me a very long time to send every single person their own independent message. I mean no disrespect by putting generic comments in people's videos. It's just a question of time constraints. So I look forward to your response on that, please. Thank you. Philip Carl. People don't understand that Europe is a bastion of a political religious faction that is opposed to the Protestant factor of Britain. One wants freedom of man, and the other priests ruling over cattle people. Europe is a bastion of political religious is opposed to Protestant faction of Britain. So this is, I think this, you're referring to the Reformation. Are you referring to the Reformation under Henry VIII? Where of course the church, it was basically the Protestant Reformation of Britain. Many countries had a Protestant Reformation, and one of those of course was Britain under Henry VIII, who he got fed up of cutting off his wife's heads and he decided to divorce them. Kind man. Very kind man indeed, Henry VIII. What, the freedom of man? Well, it's obvious like people like Thomas Paine, who wrote a book called The Rights of Man, was some people call him a proto-Protestant or a prophet of the Protestant Reformation that was to come. Priest ruling over cattle people refers to the Catholic Church. The problem is I don't think Protestant churches are generally any less abusive than the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, we've certainly seen that in Canada with the United Church of Canada, as Kevin Annett has pointed out, that the residential schools that were killing off the Indian children from the remote tribes of Canada, they were run by the Roman Catholics, by the United Church of Canada, by the Presbyterians, by all the churches collaborated in this genocide. Edwardian lady. Well, it happened, Ben. Yes, I've sent you a donation so you can buy a few beers to celebrate. Thank you very much, Edwardian lady. That is very, very useful for you to send me a donation. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I will have a good few beers to celebrate, I can promise you. I've already had a couple in Scotland with some of my friends at the Scottish UFO and Paranormal Conference, but I can always have a couple more. It's nice. I'm obviously, everything I do is free, and I don't... That'll always be the same. I'll never ever charge people or have a subscription service or, you know, anything like that. But, I mean, it does cost me money to do these things, like the equipment I use and things like that, and it takes me a lot of time and effort to make these videos. So if you do feel I deserve it, and if you can afford it, and you can help me out that way, go to the Herpanwo TV blog, herpanwo-tv.blogspot.com, go to the bottom of the column, and there's a yellow button that says donate. Just press that and put in anything you can afford or anything you feel I deserve. If it doesn't work, just let me know, because sometimes it doesn't work, and I'll give you another email address you can use. Okay. But thanks, Edwardian lady, much appreciated. GS Evolved, congratulations and happy Independence Day. Yes, I do agree with Boris Johnson that June the 23rd should become British Independence Day. I'd like to refer to it as that. And as I said, I'm not a nationalist. I think this is about self-determination. I used to be a Welsh nationalist. I think I mentioned that before, and I believe that was a mistake. I'm not a Welsh nationalist now. Adam, fantastical book reader. Hi Adam again. Ben, I think now that the elite, or powers that be, will perhaps manufacture disaster and blame it on all the people that voted out. Precisely. Well done, Adam. They are bloody well going to do that. This is the punishment beating I'm referring to. And you worked it out as well. Good for you. David Cameron will say to us people, I told you! All this proxy economic disaster was inevitably going to happen one way or the other. He'll carry on lying as usual. I guess it's the only way for him to get himself off the hook, so to speak. Anyhow, thanks for your enlightening insight, Ben. You're welcome, Adam, and I think you're absolutely right. It won't be David Cameron, it'll be his successor, but come to think of it, David Cameron is probably going to get some cushy job at the EU now, just like Tony Blair, just like Neil Kinnock. I mean, he'll get his Kalergi Prize for his efforts, and he'll end up with some place in the officialdom at Brussels. He may even end up EU president. Doomlove says, we're out. Thank fuck for that. Yes, I quite agree. That's my sentiments exactly. Now, Just a Man 400 says, I think Just a Man 400 is not British or European. Wow, you guys now have the restrictions of the EU off your back. You can decide what to do. I see they are trying to make you pay in the markets. Be bold. I would be willing to invest in the UK. The people are hard-working. The people that make up our country. The markets will turn around. Well, I think if left to their own devices, Just a Man, they will. They will turn around, and they will, like I said, if our economy is left to its own devices without all this sabotage, there's no reason why it shouldn't function perfectly. It's just that the fact is that the problem is that the government, including the EU government or national governments which collaborate with the EU and the agenda for the New World Order, have ways and means of sticking their oar in and poisoning the economy as one of the most effective weapons they have of attacking us when we don't do as we're told, or oppressing us and keeping us in line. It's one of the most it's one of them. This is one of the methods they use the most and is the most effective. So yeah, I mean, that's something we've got to be aware of. That's something that we, the British people and the people of the world, have to learn. That's a big lesson we've got to learn. Poverty, financial crashes, the boom-bust cycle, it's not natural, it doesn't just happen. These things are engineered. Jamie says, "We're leaving!" And to sweeten the deal, pig fucker Cameron has announced he's quitting. He's obviously starting a pig fucking farm somewhere. I think he probably will, yeah. There's a meme going around saying with him holding a pig, "It's just the two of us now, darling." Scott Felton posts that and it's brilliant. Jamie Fairman says, "Keep up the good work, bud." I will. Thanks, Jamie. I will. Stephen Bamber says, "They're saying Leave has won. There's even talk of Cameron resigning." Lol. I think that was actually. I think Stephen must have written that on in the early hours, probably just before it was announced. But I think he may have been slightly behind the news there, because when this video was uploaded, and actually, yeah, he probably was up and about, because when the video was uploaded, we still didn't know, because the video sort of, I think it was processed around 3:30 a.m. It was not until just after 6 a.m. that we actually knew for certain that Leave had won. Neil Duran. What was a disaster for the Remain camp? Yeah, it was, of course. Having Obama, Blair, Eddie Izzard on their side, priceless. And yeah, I mean, bad publicity. I mean, Obama sticking his oar in and saying, "Oh, we want Britain to stay in the EU because it benefits you," and that benefits America. Blair, of course, well, we all know about him. And Eddie Izzard, that was hilarious. Eddie Izzard was on Question Time supporting the Remain side, and he was wearing a pink beret. He dyed his fingernails pink, and he was wearing pink. He looked very, very strange indeed. He looked a bit like Molly Sugden. It was it's quite funny. I don't know what you'd want dressed like that. Stephen Bamber. "I think the Scottish vote had been fiddled." It had. Oh, do you mean the Scottish vote? Well, the Scottish was. Do you mean this one, or do you mean the Scottish independence vote? The Scottish independence vote was, as I explained. Well, as in this case, I mean, there's probably fiddling in this referendum an awful lot, which is why it's a credit to British people that didn't work. Despite all the extra weighting of the dice and the extra boxes of Remain votes, they still couldn't keep the Stay vote down. Sorry, the Leave vote down. The Wanderer, Scotsman. "Fuck the Queen. Long live the Port. A great effort, friend. What's next?" Thank Wanderer, yeah. Well, you'll be glad to know my next video is probably going to be the one I filmed in your country of Scotland. I was up in Bonnie, Scotland, at the Scottish UFO and Paranormal Conference, and that's probably going to be the video I do after this one. I've just got to edit it and get it sorted, and it'll be a little reportage about the Scottish UFO and Paranormal Conference. Stephen Bamber says, "The pound has taken a big dip in value. The markets have opened, and they're saying petrol will go up, and that means the price of food will as well. I think the New World Order are going to punish the British people." Exactly, Stephen, yeah. I think the dip in the pound was a bit of panic, a bit of stock market panic, plus a bit of massaging beforehand. But yeah, I mean, as far as punishing the British people with it financially, yes, we are going to get a punishment beating. Now, there's no way around that other than we're aware of what it is, why it's happening, and we don't give into it. We don't give into it at all. Stephen Bam says, "Cameron resigns." Yes. Boris Karloff winning be our new Neville Chamberlain. I'm sorry, I don't understand that bit. Sorry, mate. Tom Stargazer says, "Happy days. My mind has been plagued with politics for weeks." Yeah, I know, Tom. I mean, like I said, it's really got under my skin the last few days. This is why it's been such an emotional roller coaster for me, when I was miserable as sin, and then suddenly, wow, Leave has won, and I was like, this is what I mean by being in happy shock. I haven't got my head around it yet. I think now I'm back home and I'm getting into the news and I recap on all the political talk that's been going on for the last 2 days. You know, I think I'll get my head around it. But obviously, there's been an awful. I've been looking at some of the videos and stuff like that that's been put up over the weekend. There's been a lot of political talk shows on TV. I'll have to catch up on it. It'll probably take me about a week to catch up on those. Things like that. Stephen Bamber says, "They're saying the Scottish votes are stay, but because Scotland is part of the UK, it has to leave. This means Scotland will want a vote on independence. I say job done for the EU, breaking up Britain." Well, that's a good point. And I've talked about that. And Nicola Sturgeon has already mentioned that. So Britain may have voted to leave the EU, but not all Britain will stay out of the EU for long. I mean, one of the ways that they're going to get Scotland back in is very simple. There'll be another independence referendum, which will go yes. Scotland goes back to the EU, and then they just got the rest of us, and that's what we've got to be ready for. That's what I mean by this referendum being the first shot in the war. Stephen Bamber. I think what's happened is that the Illuminati had decided that tough love Cameron wasn't working, so they let the no vote win in England, so they can bring in the three favourite Muppets, Boris. Their favourite Muppet, Boris. This is what Ian was saying. He was saying that that maybe this is just another part of the scam, and it's possible. I mean, it's always a possibility, isn't it? And Adam Fantastical Bookkeep Reader says, I'm shocked I didn't actually expect it. Exactly, just like me. I really didn't. I suppose it would have been too obvious for people if we remained in the EU. Too many people were openly admitting to leave. I think they decided to leave. GT, all the mess they created cleared by blaming the people and then eventually rejoin the EU in a different way. LOL. I mean, they must have patience because at the end of the day they don't suffer. Yeah, that's the problem. This could be what we're facing. We could be facing that situation where we end up going back to the EU, but with a different deal. So that's another thing we've got to be wary of. You know. Philip Cale says, it seems Vote Leave has won, but it will come down to the Cheshire region, if not London. Funny enough, Philip, there's a sort of semi-humorous campaign for London to devolve from the UK, like Scotland is, because London was one of the biggest Remain places in regions in the country, probably because of the number of foreign nationals there. So maybe they may say, well, if Scotland can leave, why can't London? So is that possible, or is that just a joke? I don't know. An Outlaw In-Law says, it's all fraud and deception, so how are we going to hold the fraudsters to account? Well, that's a good question. I don't know. Now, an Outlaw In-Law is another person who said they don't like me posting these shout-outs about the next... and about answering your comments on a future video. Like I said to Phuket, could you explain why? And how would you like to be contacted instead? I'll do it if it's practical. Because I don't see what the problem is. I don't understand why that's so awful when I do that. David11 says Europe gets to blow the 3,000 illegal, mostly Muslim immigrants that it saved today out of its own ass. This is a link here to. Here we go. There's a link here to Italy's Coast Guard. 3,000 migrants rescued one day in the Mediterranean. Yeah, this is the problem. Like the boats that are coming across the Mediterranean, often they get intercepted by the Navy, who then picks them up, and you can't really do much. All they're doing at the moment is they're bringing them into the country. As I said, it's a difficult situation, but maybe they'll, if it wasn't for EU directives, they could actually return them back to the nation where the boat left. And as I said, I mean, I'm not heartless. I think the final solution to the immigration issue has to be the declassification of free energy, the reforming of the economy. Because there's no need for anyone to be poor in this world. I've spoken about this before, about this situation. I think in the post-Illuminati world, it's often the countries where the migrants are coming from now which could end up with an immigration crisis in the future, because people who live in cold, wet countries like Britain will want to move there to get their place in the sun. When everyone has as much as they need, well, but sunshine, we want more sunshine. We're going to move to Somalia. Let's get a beachfront property in Somalia. And then the Somalians will say, we don't want these bloody British people coming over here. It's not right, it's ruining our country. We'll see anyway. Anyway, guys, thanks for your comments. I'll probably end up doing more videos on this subject again. But for now, I think I'll just leave it because I want to concentrate on other things. Oh, but David Icke has just put up a video saying we did it, but this is just the start. Yeah, David Icke's videos, I'm going to have a watch of that because I think David is thinking the same way I am now about what this EU referendum means and What they're going to do, what dirty tricks they're going to play. What they got up their sleeve which they're going to pull out to try and manipulate us back into line. We shall say. Either way, Hapanmo TV will be ready for them, because I'm ready to tackle them, head them off at the pass, and all those other cliches from the Western movies, you know, to make sure that they don't get away with whatever scam these hucksters are planning to unleash on the innocent people of Britain, of Europe and the world. So thank you very much for watching Hapanmo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, stop the New World Order.